This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice.
Serious danger to Australia.
Hey everyone, it's me, Tom Ballard, here again with more bonus content for the election. We are meeting Greens candidates from across the country in targeted seats. It's just me, no Emerald Moon. She sends her love. She's very busy running the Queensland media campaign and actually winning the goddamn election up there. So it's just myself. Quick note, if you like this show and you have a little bit of money, patreon.com/Serious Danger AU, even just $3 a month. It helps us pay our wonderful producer, pay the basic cost of hosting the podcast, and further the revolution. Joining me for this edition of this bonus content is the Greens candidate for the Melbourne seat of Kooyong, Piers Mitchem. Hello, Piers.
G'day, Tom. Thanks for having me along.
Hey, no, thank you for running for the Greens. And yes, we did it. Woot!
We did.
It's a pleasure to meet you. I briefly met you on Instagram Live. We did an Instagram Live Q&A a little while ago.
In the deepest, darkest lockdown, I think it was, wasn't it? During the depths of lockdown.
Fuck, that's right.
Yeah,
I've blocked most of that out. I do remember talking to you, having a nice time, but most of that period is just a very distant memory. So we shan't dwell.
Yes.
Really quickly, just for folks that don't know, we've got people listening all over the country, obviously. Whereabouts is Kooyong? What kind of seat is it? What kind of suburbs are we talking about? Tell us about Kooyong.
So Kooyong is essentially Melbourne inner east. It's a relatively affluent electorate, I'd say, and it comprises suburbs of Canterbury, this is testing Canterbury, Camberwell, Montalbot, Surrey Hills, Kew East, Hawthorn, parts of Burwood, and there's probably a few I've forgotten. But it's Josh Frydenberg's.
No!
Shouldn't admit that, should I? 4 weeks after the election. It's Josh Frydenberg's electorate. He's been obviously currently the Treasurer of Australia. He's been in power here or held the Kooyong seat for the last 12 years. The interesting thing about Kooyong is for the 100 odd years or so, 120 years since Federation, Kooyong has been a conservative seat. So it's been held by the right wing for the entirety of that time. In 2019, when Julian Burnside ran for the Greens, he got the closest opposition result in 70 years to turfing out the Liberals, to turfing out the Conservatives. So we're seeing this sort of seismic shift in Kooyong away from the Liberals and the right wing toward more progressive politics, which is why it's such a kind of exciting, dynamic electorate to be in, and it's why I've landed here.
It is a really exciting contest. It was Julian Burnside in 2019, 8% swing against Frydenberg. A lot of that did seem to go to the independent candidate who ran in 2019, Oliver Yates, who was formerly of the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, very climate conscious, probably the teal independent before it was cool, I suppose, back in the day, along with, I guess, Zali Steggall was running in 2019 as well. So he was out there as well, and Frydenberg hung on, but the contest is certainly on in 2019. We'll talk about the bit of the race in a sec, but we should also introduce you and get to know you. Who is Piers Mitchem, and why are you running for the Greens in Kooyong?
Oh, God, isn't that a loaded question?
Look, 30 seconds. Keep it brief. I don't want any stump sheet bullshit. Come on, mate. Let's keep it snappy.
No. That's fine. Look, I'm 38 years old. I'm a lawyer. I've been working in law for about 10 or 12 years. And I'm essentially running for the Greens because I was just bloody fed up, right? We are in a climate emergency. We're being told this is code red for humanity. We're facing a climate disaster, and our government, I just don't know that there's an example in human history where a government can be so aware and so informed of the impending crisis that we're facing and not sort of take measures to avert that crisis, but actually to accelerate into it. So, look, I was sitting at home last year in lockdown, just working and coasting along, and the opportunity came up to run for pre-selection and to nominate for the Greens. I like people. I like talking. I'm super interested in politics. I've always been a Greens voter. I've been a Greens member for years. The timing was right, so I put myself up to run. And look, there's a certain degree of pleasure in running against Josh Frydenberg, I think. I'd very much like to unseat him. He hasn't really endeared himself to the electorate in the last couple of years, and I think Kooyong's really ready for a change.
Oh, please. Yeah. I read his bio. The ABC, they list all the different candidates and stuff. And I read his bio. Yeah. It's just all about how much fucking tennis he played. I don't give a shit about your tennis credentials. Who are you as a human being, as a politician, you weirdo? But you're also like, you were born and raised, right? You went to Trinity Grammar in Kew and, you're born and raised in that part of the world. Employment lawyer, you studied art and law at the University of Melbourne, and you graduated from King's College in London, for God's sakes, with a master's degree focused on non-proliferation and disarmament, as well as the risks associated with emerging nuclear weapons technologies. That's pretty big and heavy. Is that coming up on the campaign trail at all about nuclear destruction?
Yeah, look, I'm working to sort of elevate the issue. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, I don't know whether you've heard of him, but each year they release what's called the Doomsday Clock, which is an assessment of how close we are to the end, essentially. And the two greatest risks that they assess to the human race are, one, climate change. We know that. But the second one is nuclear war, and it's something that's kind of fallen off the agenda a little bit since the end of the Cold War. But we do have thousands of nuclear weapons in circulation around the world, and some pretty scary people in charge of them at times. Vladimir Putin, and not so long ago Donald Trump, with sole authority to launch nuclear weapons. It's a scary prospect. So it's certainly something that I'm really working hard to draw attention to as well, and to talk about as much as we can.
I hope so. I don't know. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. Like, obviously, at the moment, there's a lot of focus at the time of recording. There was a lot of focus on this Solomon Islands deal, China's role in the world, Australia's relationship to China, the conflict in Ukraine. These are massive international stories. They're leading news bulletins, and at least amongst many members of the media class, they are, being placed, and by the political class as well, indeed, are being placed sort of front and center as a really key issue in this election. I don't know. Is that reflected in the conversations that you're having with people? I just find it hard sometimes to imagine people on a doorstop or on a regular day-to-day basis investing huge amounts of or deciding their vote over these sort of massive geopolitical questions.
Yeah, look, nuclear weapons aside, the government is working very, very hard to skew the conversation around the election to security. I think it's a massive misjudgment or miscalculation, because a lot of people that I've been speaking to, at least on our stalls and during our door knocks and so on, probably see this fear mongering over China for exactly what it is. I mean, it's a complete beat up. It's a xenophobic and probably racist dog whistle to areas of the electorate that the coalition wants to shore up. There's no evidence that China presents any sort of sovereign or existential risk to Australia at all. And I think the problem for the government at the moment is that up to 30% of Kooyong residents and voters have a Chinese background. And they see this strategy for exactly what it is, and they're not taking kindly to it, quite rightly, and looking for alternatives to the coalition. They don't want to vote for them anymore. They see Labor running the same sorts of lines about fear-mongering over China and those sorts of things, and they're looking to people like the Greens or other candidates as an alternative. I think it's a big miscalculation from the coalition. So, to come back to your question, people aren't so concerned about these apparent security risks or what the government says are massive risks to our security. They're concerned about the narrative and the way the government's conducting itself, and they see these sorts of lines that they're running as dog whistles, trying to tap into a fear of the other, a fear of what the other might do to us. And I don't think that's going to come off well for the government, at least not in these areas.
It was true. I mean, we should never be shocked or surprised by the depths that Peter Dutton will go to, but on Anzac Day, as Defence Minister, seriously putting out there that the only way to prepare for peace is to prepare for fucking war. And I don't know what the plan is there. Like, what kind of serious idea they think the world would be, what kind of state the world would be in if the West ever went to war with China, the horror that would unleash, and also the lack of any kind of interest in any diplomatic alternatives is truly kind of terrifying, that stuff. You're right. That is far more scary than any supposed threat posed by China is surely the way that the US and the West seems to be gearing up for a serious war, for fuck's sake.
Totally. And I don't know whether I missed the memo, but I would have thought that the best way to avoid war is not to threaten your neighbours with war. like unprovoked. Yeah. It's made it unprovoked. Effectively, an unprovoked threat of war against our neighbours. Like, that seems to me a pretty good way to set yourself on the path towards war. I don't follow his logic at all. It's look, we know he loves talking about that stuff. We know he gets sorry to be crude, but we know he gets a big stiffy over big defence projects and submarines and that sort of stuff. It's just his MO, isn't it?
And just finally on the nuclear question, I mean, you've talked previously, and the Greens have come out pretty strongly against the AUKUS deal. Much has been made of Adam Bett referring to them as
floating Chernobyls.
Yeah, floating Chernobyls. The impact they would have, both from their waste, but also the proliferation, the greater use of nuclear energy across the board, particularly in a military context, and the kind of impacts that has. Is that coming up as well in your campaign, or how do you tackle those kind of issues when this drumming up and the war drum, the drums for war are being beaten? People might view the AUKUS thing as a wonderful thing that will bring us closer into the US's orbit and make us safer. How do you talk about that?
Yeah, look, the government's tried really hard to sell this as an amazing win for Australia, and basically they pitched it as saying that these submarines have got extended range. With these nuclear reactors in them, we can send them all the way across the world and 7 times over, right? They're essentially limitless in how far they can travel. And they've really pitched that as a really great thing for Australia. But what they're not explaining, what they're not telling us, is that the only reason you have extended range is so that you can go and fight wars away from your own shores. So they're not they're not nothing to do with defensive capability about someone invading us or threatening our own shores. It's about threatening someone else. And when they announced at AUKUS, we had Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, who forgot Scott Morrison's name, shows how important this was to the Americans, and Scott Morrison up there.
Well, hang on. I wouldn't invest in Joe Biden's memory being particularly indicative of applying importance to anything. I don't want to be ageist, but dude is old and he forgets a lot of things. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, he might. But what they spoke about was this concept of interoperability, right? And what they're really talking about is these attack submarines going to the South China Sea and working in conjunction with the US submarine fleet to protect the US nuclear deterrent. That means these attack submarines basically work in formation with the larger nuclear-armed US ballistic missile submarines to protect them. So to keep the US nuclear capability alive in the South China Sea. That's what our government has essentially committed us to, and that's what they're not telling us. What have we bought into here? We've bought into a nuclear crisis. Have we committed to fighting a nuclear war? I don't know. It certainly looks that way by the statements the government sort of made when they announced this deal. That has not permeated through, right? I don't think the government has been fully frank with us about what obligations these submarines entail, and that's a key risk. So, yeah, I think a lot of people were wowed and impressed by the apparent capability of these new submarines, but it's really important that we take the next step and think, well, what do these new capabilities mean, and what have we agreed to in acquiring them? And I really think things lead inexorably to fighting in a nuclear crisis over Taiwan and the South China Sea with the US nuclear-armed submarine fleet. A really dangerous and essentially a crazy proposition. I just don't think Australia has any... How does it serve our national interest, right? I mean, our relationship with China is tough and it is complex and we need to deal with it and we need to work through a lot of issues. But I don't think that involves inserting ourselves into the middle of a nuclear exchange.
Yeah. Well said. It serves the US national interest. And once again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love the presence of the Greens because the two major parties are on a unity ticket when it comes to the US alliance. Like, you just cannot criticize the foreign policy decisions of the US. The US is a force for good, no questions asked. Any deviation from that narrative will get you howled at by the insane right-wing press and the political class. So thank God that the Greens have the ability to say, this is actually a bit bullshit. It can actually call out the US when they're doing horrible things in the world that don't make us safer at all.
I agree. And the inability to do that leads to bad decisions, right? I mean, that led to Iraq, that led to Vietnam. We need to be able to have rational decisions about the direction of our foreign policy and where we send our troops and that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, at the moment, the Greens are as the third biggest political party, we're playing a major role in that discussion. Without us, I think we'd be all the poorer for it.
If you get elected and Joe Biden comes and speaks to the parliament, will you do a Bob Brown and will you heckle him and hang shit on him like Bob Brown did to George Bush? Will you make that commitment here today, Piers Mitchem?
No, but I might have a quiet word in his ear, provided he doesn't forget.
All right, we have to talk about the other factor of this race, which is, of course, the independent candidate backed by Climate 200 is Dr. Monique Ryan. At this time of recording, we're in the middle of DebateGate, okay? It's everywhere you look. Everyone's talking about it in every pub across the country. What is going on here? First of all, let's really briefly talk about who is Dr. Monique Ryan and who is this independent candidate that does seem to be making some real inroads and gearing and turning out a pretty massive campaign for Kooyong.
So Dr. Monique Ryan is the next iteration, I suppose, of Oliver Yates that you mentioned before from 2019. She's running as an independent candidate, essentially on I would say, a centrist or a centre-right platform, looking primarily to attract pissed off Liberal voters who want to see action in the areas of, climate change, gender equality, political integrity, and so on, and asylum seekers. So she's really running on 3 or 4 key platforms, and she's targeting primarily Josh Frydenberg's voter base, and doing pretty well at it by the looks of it. I think he's pretty worried about his primary vote, as a result of Dr. Ryan. And so what we've sort of seen building over the last few months is a kind of head-to-head rivalry between the two over the Liberal primary vote in Kooyong. And it seems to kind of sort of exploded in the last couple of days in this debate about a debate. Are they going to have a debate? Are they not? Josh made some sort of offer about a debate at the Channel 9 studios, and Monique said, no, that's not in Kooyong because I don't think she's been out of Kooyong yet. So she's saying, no, I want the debate in Kooyong and I want it in front of Kooyong voters. And then Josh says, no, I don't want to do that. I think they've agreed to, at the moment, a debate on Sky News in front of undecided Kooyong voters. How they're going to determine that, I don't know. But they want to do a debate in front of undecided Kooyong voters. And then I think this morning, Friday threw out the possibility of another debate as a follow-up to that.
And where's Piers Mitchem? Where's the Greens call?
Trying very hard to insert myself into the middle of all of that. Yeah, I've been tweeting at them. I've been shouting at them. I even accosted Friday on the phone yesterday and asked him where my invite to the debate was, because I will be there. I don't care whether it's in Channel 9 studios, Kooyong, Darwin, Perth, wherever. I'll be there. I'd love the opportunity to debate him, to take him to task on his abysmal climate performance and the rest of it.
Man, it's such bullshit. There's no official debate process in Australia for anything. I think every election, it seems we just try and wing it and figure it out, and then it's on fucking Sky News, which no one fucking watches. And then I don't even know what's happening with the ABC. I don't even know if we're going to get a leaders debate on the ABC, on the public broadcaster where you think this shit should happen.
We're not going to get anything on the ABC, Tom.
Really?
Oh, the ABC don't like the Greens. What are you talking about?
Oh, no. Sorry, not the Greens. I'm not talking about God. Heaven forbid that the Greens would get any platform anyway. No, I'm just saying, like, any debate at all. Obviously, that is a travesty as well. That yes, the way that the Greens are sidelined in these debates, but the fact that it's like this sort of real piecemeal that we're deciding what debates to be having during the actual election campaign. That's really quite dog shit. But also, I think, Monique Ryan has a decent point that, you should have these kind of debate and forums in front of people who are actually going to vote for them. I suppose people could travel from Kooyong to Docklands to watch the debate, in theory, but it seems like a pretty reasonable position. And then Frydenberg also responded saying that, yes, doing a debate in front of people in Kooyong would be like a campaign event for Dr. Monique Ryan, which also doesn't seem like he has a huge amount of confidence in his support in the local community.
No, exactly.
More broadly, though, I suppose, I've seen you give very, I would say, diplomatic quotes about the presence of Dr. Monique Ryan and the acknowledgement, and you welcome her into the race as an independent, as a candidate. How are you seeing this play out in the race? What do you think about this particular independent campaign, and how is it going to affect you as the Greens candidate?
Well, that's an open question. It's essentially we'll find out on polling day. We are really happy that other candidates are talking about climate. Right, it only elevates the issue, and it only pushes the issue to the forefront where we're really comfortable and we're really confident talking about our climate reforms, our emissions targets and so on, that are the strongest of any candidate or political party to my knowledge. So from that perspective, having someone else in the mix to talk about these issues and to help us elevate them is a terrific thing. What I'm seeing at the moment really is that her supporter base is primarily Liberal, And she's chipped off. She may well have chipped off a hell of a lot of Josh's primary. I'm not sure how many inroads she's made into ours or to Labor's primary vote. Essentially, we'll find out on polling day. What we're seeing, just anecdotally, but out on the street is a hell of a lot of support for us. There's a really positive response. We've got a great volunteer base. We're getting good donations. All the signs are there that we're tracking really well. We know that if we come in on polling day with a higher primary vote than Dr. Ryan, then we can expect significant preference flows to us that could well push us over the line to take the seat. That'd be the best, absolutely the best result. That said, I don't pretend that we're the favourites heading into this. We don't take a single vote for granted. We're campaigning as hard as we bloody well can. We'll see what the outcome is. But yeah, there's been some discussion recently about Dr. Ryan having an effect on the Greens vote, and I don't really think that's quite right. Her focus, and she's quite explicit about this, is on the Liberal primary vote. She keeps promoting a lot of her supporters who are ex-Liberal voters who have shifted for her. They would never have voted for the Greens anyway. I'm probably a bit less sanguine about any effect that she's had on our primary, but let's find out in a month's time, right?
You're right.
We are very different candidates. We talk about climate as a priority, but the Greens really talk about a lot of other things that she doesn't address, like income and wealth quality for young people, student debt, housing affordability, tax reform, welfare reform. Aged care, healthcare, all of those sorts of things that really are not Dr. Ryan's focus. She describes herself as a fiscal conservative. She's very, free market, trickle-down economics, those sorts of things are her comfort zone, and we're a long way from that. And the other key difference is she's been quite explicit in saying that she may well work with a Liberal or coalition government to return them to power if she's in the balance of power. We absolutely won't.
Yeah.
We'll only ever form government with or work with Labor in government, but you will not see us working with the Liberals. So some key differences there, and that's why I'm a little bit sceptical about these reports that she's taking a lot of the Greens vote. I think for a lot of people, a lot of Greens voters, the idea of someone in their name working with a coalition government is probably anathema to what they stand for, right?
Right. And I'm not in a Liberal seat. I have no idea what it's like campaigning a Liberal seat. I understand that these independents, like you look at Allegra Spender in Wentworth as well. I tweeted, she was like, I'm not anti-Liberal, I'm pro-climate. And I tweeted, well, if you're pro-climate, then you have to be anti-Liberal. I'm sorry. The Liberal Party has let us know who they are when it comes to the question of climate change, and they're bad and they're not going to make it better. And so there's just a logical... There's no logical consistency between those two positions. Sorry, it just can't happen. But I suppose you're not out there, if you're a disaffected Liberal, you're not out there trashing the idea of voting Liberal. You're just saying that these current Liberal people fucking suck and we need to return integrity to politics by being independent and that kind of thing. So I guess there's a political calculus that pays off. But then even on the questions of climate, right? When she was announced, there was a quote from Dr. Monique Ryan saying, I don't have a lot of granularity to my ideas about climate change and things like that as yet. Over the next few months, I'll be taking the opportunity to listen to what people want. And at the moment, her climate policies on her website are reduce emissions by at least 60% by 2030, in line with Sally Steggall's climate change bill. This is what you'll hear from most of the Climate 200 independents. They're all backing the 60% target, even though the Science Climate Council tells us we need to reduce emissions by 75% by 2030, which is Greens policy. Accelerate electrification, decarbonize our electricity supply, sure. Speed up the uptake of electric vehicles and strengthen emissions standards, yep. Empower households to make the shift to clean energy and end taxpayer subsidies to fossil fuel industries. So nothing about, making sure that we don't open new coal mines or how we move away from an exporting fossil fuel industry or anything like that, because of course that might make you fiscally irresponsible, and we can't have that. We need to keep the market killing the planet to make some sweet, sweet cash. So we've talked about the independents on the podcast before. I'm all up for more people getting involved in the process. If it makes Josh Frydenberg's life a lot harder, I'm in favor of it. I'm on board. But the scrutiny on these folks, particularly on the climate questions, as to why their position, which is less ambitious and less in line with the science of the Greens, is a more preferable position, I'm still yet to hear a particularly convincing argument.
As am I. I'm still yet to hear any argument about it, right? Look, the position that Dr. Ryan and perhaps other independents are advancing is better than the current, right? It is undoubtedly better than the status quo. We've got to be upfront about that. But the point you made is exactly right, that we are required under the Paris Agreement to show the highest possible level of ambition and to follow the best available science in avoiding catastrophic climate change. Our smartest and brightest scientists are telling us that for us to play our part and for Australia to act consistently with avoiding catastrophic climate change, we need to go hard and fast on emissions. We need to cut emissions by, as you said, 75% by 2030 and hit net zero by 2035. Over and above that, it's possible and it's feasible. Just what we lack is the political ambition to get us there. I think it's really incumbent on anyone that decides to adopt a target short of that to explain why they're raising the white flag on climate change, why they're saying to their voters, we'll adopt my targets as good enough, but they are going to let catastrophic climate change in the door. Although I should say they are consistent with letting catastrophic climate change happen, right? I think you've got to explain that away because our best science tells us it's just not good enough. And so the Greens, I think, stand alone at the moment, don't we, in adopting those scientific targets and holding firm on them and saying to the electorate, look, if you are looking to vote climate and if you really want to achieve what we set out to under the Paris Agreement, vote Green because we are the best and only option to achieve that at the moment. It makes me really proud to stand for this party.
Yes.
Yes.
No, it just makes sense. I don't know. It's just the goal of people to say we're listening to the science and then their policies don't reflect the science. You go, hang on.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I hope some probing questions are put to them on that point. I hope the media at the moment has really not.
You got to go as a question. You can be an undecided voter. You don't know whether you're going to vote for Josh Frydenberg or Monique Ryan, and you got to go along to Sky News and ask them some fucking questions. Question number 1, why aren't I, Piers Mitchem, on that stage?
That's it. Well, exactly. I spoke to Friday on the phone yesterday.
Yeah, what did he say? You tweeted that he couldn't give you a straight answer.
He wouldn't give me a straight answer. No, he just talked over the top of me as he normally does, and that was that. So he sounded like a man under pressure, let's put it that way.
Challenge him to some sort of game of tennis, and whoever wins gets the seat of Kooyong. How about that?
That would not end well for me.
Could you beat him? Do you play tennis?
No, I can barely hit the ball.
Final question on this. Have you guys figured out the how to vote cards? Now, again, keeping in mind that how to vote cards are way overstated and we don't direct our preferences anywhere and voters decide where their preferences go. But do we know what the Monique Ryan how to vote card might look like and what the Greens one might look like? Are they running on an open ticket? Do we know much more about that yet or no?
Yeah, Dr. Ryan's not doing preferences at all. She's been really upfront about that. She sent a note round to the entire electorate saying, put me number 1 and what you do after that is up to you, which of course it is. Mm-hmm. But she's just not entering into that discussion at all. We haven't settled our preferences yet. It may well be that by the time this podcast goes out, we have issued them. So people should certainly check our website and our socials to see whether they're up there. But look, you can rest assured that parties like One Nation, who are running in Kooyong, United Australia Party and the Liberals will be somewhere way down the bottom of the order. They'll be at the bottom of our recommended preferencing list.
Bloody oath. Mitchem.greens.org.au is the website with all the information. If you are in Kooyong, if you're in that part of the world and you want to help Piers out, always welcome volunteers to door night, to how to vote cards, to host a placard, all that kind of stuff. Mitchem.greens.org.au. You can follow him on Twitter at Piers Mitchem. That's Piers Mitchem, Mitchem. Thanks so much for talking to us, man, and good luck. We're all barracking for you.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to a really positive and strong result on election day. And thanks for having me on. I love this podcast. It's terrific to come along and talk to you.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
Cheers.
Serious danger to Australia.